everyone. Welcome. I'm Louise Crow. I'm Chief Executive of mySociety. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you all to TICTeC 2025. We actually made it. I'm delighted so many of you could make it in person, and I want to give a really warm welcome as well to those of you joining online. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to be using Slido to take questions throughout the sessions here in the auditorium and in the Hurton Arse room, as well as having roaming mics for the in-person audience to ask questions. So you can use the barcode on the screen to join Slido. That's also in your printed program if you're here in person, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code 2986475, and then you're going to be asked to choose the room where the session you're in is being held, which again you can see in the conference schedule. You can also upvote questions in Slido as well, and I would ask you to do that because that's really helpful in making sure that the most useful and popular questions get asked in the limited time that we have available. Some attendees here don't want their photograph taken during TICTeC, so please don't photograph anyone who's wearing a red lanyard, and thank you in advance for being considerate about that. We have a quiet well-being room available at the venue for anyone who needs some time away from the conference activities, and directions for this can be found in the program. Again, you're getting the theme. Lots of the information you need is in the program. Finally, on housekeeping, we're really keen to hear your thoughts, both on the future of pro-democracy technology and also on the TICTeC conference itself. So to make sharing your input easy, you'll find a few citizen dialogue kit devices placed around the catering area in floor 1. So please do take a moment at some point to share your views using those devices. So with all that housekeeping squared away, I guess question, why are we here? Well, TICTeC brings together civic tech community to build our understanding of what works and why when we use tech to try and distribute power rather than to concentrate it. So to try to strengthen public participation, transparency, and accountability in governance. And I wanted to start out by noting that the first TICTeC conference was held in London in 2015. So this year actually marks 10 years of TICTeC. And we brought it back as an in-person event for the first time since the pandemic last year, and we wanted to use these two events as an opportunity for us as a community to reflect on what's changed in that interval and also over the last few years, and make it an invitation to think about what we're going to need to meet the challenges of the next decades. And I recognize this is a global community, so I want to start by recognizing that the answers to those questions are going to be diverse. But I'm going to try and just kick things off with some reflections of my own and talk a bit about why we at mySociety value TICTeC. So back in 2015, that first conference was really motivated by a sense that we had as early participants in the then young, relatively young field of civic tech, a sense of responsibility to pay serious attention to the question of impact and how the tools that we were developing were affecting society. Recognizing that that's a complex question, but to borrow a phrase from the cyberneticist Stafford Beer, the purpose of a system is what it does. So we can be more effective, clearer thinking when we judge systems by the real-world outcomes they produce, rather than what we'd like them to produce, or even what we design them to produce. So as a field, as a movement, as a niche sector of the tech economy, however you think of civic tech, we'd be making a much stronger contribution to society if we were able to build the evidence base for the outcomes that the civic tech services and platforms were contributing to. So in the decades since that first TICTeC conference, we've seen really significant changes, both in the democratic and the technological context that frame our field of civic tech. I'm not going to set myself the unenviable task of summarizing what's going on in democracy and technology in an era when 10 days can feel like 10 years. But the recently released 2025 edition of the VDEM Institute's annual report, which takes a multidimensional approach to measuring democracy worldwide, doesn't pull its punches. They say the outlook on the world at the end of 2024 is worse than in the last 25 years. The third wave of autocratization is deepening and spreading. It includes the weakening of democracy in some established liberal democracies, breakdown of democracy in countries that were democratic for most of the 21st century, as well as deepening of autocracy on already autocratic states. Almost all aspects of democracy are declining in more countries than they're improving compared to 10 years ago. And it's clear that on the world stage, anti-democratic actors aren't standing still, and they're constantly learning how to use technology to extend their power and control over people. The VDEM report cites sharp declines in freedom of expression and the deliberative aspect of respectful debate based on facts, and it highlights the ways in which polarization and disinformation are mutually reinforcing and fuel autocratization. And the social media ecosystem that has developed can do many things, but it's not proving adequate to that task of connecting people in a way that encourages and enables them to engage in common problem solving in the democratic sphere. So Professor Shelley Boulian, who was one of the speakers at that first TICTeC 10 years ago, published work last year across 4 countries and 5 different social media platforms, suggesting a real splintering of the public sphere in which ideological differences are significant in determining what social media platforms people use, and those differences then increase as the platforms limit opportunities to hear and understand the other side, settle on compromises. The online world has also become the venue for large-scale crime and digital warfare, with cyber attacks increasing in frequency, complexity, and impact, evolving from simple malware to sophisticated ransomware and state-sponsored attacks. And I think that reflects that we're now a fully socio-technical society, so a complex system involving social and technical elements, but where those two are really deeply intertwined and interdependent. And I'm going to show my age here, but when I first started working in tech, there were lots of people still kind of asking, does what happens online really matter? Does it make a difference? And I feel that early question of whether digital tools have an impact on society has really been answered with a resounding yes. Digital benefits, digital harms are both obviously real. What remains is the question of how we make that net impact of network digital tech on society a positive one. And as we're asking that question, we have a new generation of AI tools which are bringing new capabilities that are really quite different in profile to the procedural systems that we've got used to and are also rapidly changing themselves. The frontiers of this development are largely happening behind closed doors in commercial companies that are receiving large amounts of investment but haven't yet established sustainable business models for these new tools. It's not a recipe for careful and even-handed exploration of their capabilities and weaknesses. One of the presentations that really struck in my head from last year's TICTeC was from Marcy Harris of the PopVox Foundation. She called her talk Overcoming the Red Queen Problem, Ensuring Democracy Keeps Pace with Emerging Technologies. And the Red Queen is a character from the children's book Alice in Wonderland, whose catchphrase that she teaches to Alice is, "It takes all the running that you can do just to keep in the same place." And I think that resonated with me because mySociety was founded more than 20 years ago to help democracy deliver on the raised expectations of the internet era. And I think it's a fundamental shared concern of the civic tech community that the processes and institutions of governing democratically are important. And the challenges that face us are big ones. We need to be using the best tech we possibly can to ensure fairer, safer societies in the future. And with that new generation of AI tools, we're still early in the process of understanding what they do well, what they do badly, and how that fits into the real problems that we have. I attended an event recently where Zizi Papakuritsi, the professor of communication and political science at the University of Illinois, described AI in the public consciousness as an open signifier. So a symbol that's so open to interpretation that we can really fill it with anything that we want to, any kind of meaning. So if we want to see AI as a magic wand, it's vague enough for that. If we want to see it as the end of days, it can encompass that as well. And my background academically is in artificial intelligence, and even back then in the late 90s, it was a common gripe in the field that once an AI system did something useful reliably, people wouldn't think of it as AI anymore. Once it actually does something useful, it's just computer programming, and we're all really used to that. So being really specific about what we're using and why and what outcomes we get is important for a number of different reasons. I read recently the AI reporter, Karen Howe, described the term AI as being like the term transportation. It covers a lot of ground, no pun intended. Transportation can be a bicycle or a rocket ship, and it's important to distinguish between the two because the cost of building a rocket ship is really different from the cost of building a bicycle. It matters what impacts the tools we build have, not least because the tools have costs themselves. And one of the other ways in which our context has changed is we're increasingly feeling the pressures of a heating planet. And then we come to the events of the last few months, where the rapidly changing geopolitical landscape has significantly affected the resources available to civil society and civic tech organizations around the world through cuts in state funding from America, but also from countries across Europe. 3 months ago, we did not think that we were going to be holding TICTeC at all. It's a complex and volatile moment that we're meeting at, and one that I think we have to acknowledge just holds a lot of uncertainty, and that can make it really hard to do the work that we do in very concrete ways. But there's never only one story happening. That VDEM report also points out that autocracy isn't a one-way train, and that there are countries around the world bucking the trend, either gradually or dramatically. So I hope we can come together and collectively find some motivation from the fact that the future is not yet at this point determined as well. We've got work to do in applying technology for positive democratic outcomes, and our job is to imagine and prototype the futures we want to live in, and then be humble and curious enough to learn what's effective. So all of that is the reason why TICTeC 2025 has a renewed focus on pro-democracy technology. We're aiming to use it to bring together people working on uses of tech to defend against threats to democracy and safeguard the openness it needs to operate, and those who are using technologies constructively to try and enrich and strengthen the heartbeat of civic and democratic life. We run TICTeC to support learning and collaboration between people and organizations with an interest in these areas, and to support you all to do more effective, evidence-based and impactful work. So on behalf of myself and my colleagues at mySociety, I'd like to extend our gratitude to the organizations that have made TICTeC possible this year in the face of really significant challenges, and that's NED, Porticus, Meet in Mechelen, Stad Mechelen, and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom Global Innovation Hub. I also want to give huge thanks to the team from mySociety who work enormously hard to make TICTeC the best possible conference and program of work it can be. Gemma Mulder, Alex Parsons, Julia Cushion, and Georgia Kelsey have all been working on the planning, well, in Gemma's case, basically since this time last year. And also thanks to everyone you will find around the venue in a red t-shirt who has allowed themselves to be repurposed from their day job into various different roles over the next 2 days. And if you do need to ask a question while you're here, you can direct it to them. Over those next 2 days, we're going to be hearing from practitioners and researchers from around the world, developing, applying, adapting, and evaluating tools and approaches across critical themes of democracy, access to information and open data, people and politics. We're going to be hearing from people trying exciting new approaches, but also those who've been doing the hard work of growing organizations and popularizing tools for years or even decades. We have speakers today reporting on tech projects to defend and improve elections, to support communities in challenging contexts around the world, working on governance of and with AI, and looking at larger scale questions than just the impacts of particular tools, but asking what broader conditions we need to foster in order to sustain impact as a field. And you're not going to get off lightly. You also have an important job to do over the next 2 days, which is to build your network, find the people whose work you can learn from and who can learn from you, and also make human connections, make some friends, get to know each other, have a good time. Just before lunch today, we're going to have a networking session for you to meet and talk to new people and hopefully find some future colleagues and collaborators. And after lunch, in recognition that we're coming together at a pretty unique moment in time, we're keeping some space for several unconference sessions for in-person attendees. So we're all going to collectively create the agenda for those. Please do help us make sure that we discuss the things that would be most useful to you there. take a look at your programme for instructions on how to submit and vote on those unconference topics. Topics need to be submitted by 12:30 and we'll be voting on them from 1 to 1:30.